Okay, Julian Assange might or might not be addressing the world from the balcony of the...
I hope there's a balcony
the embassy
involved.
in Ecuador. There is a balcony. Now, I'm not sure, though, whether he will use it.
It's a ground floor flat, though, isn't it? I read it was a ground floor apartment.
You're ruining all the Evita kind of fantasies of
Maybe
people
they'll let
here.
him go upstairs to give the address.
Yeah, maybe the staircase. I don't know. Somewhere secure, anyway, you would think. But the question is whether the Australian government is doing all that it can or should do. The Foreign Minister Bob Carr was asked in the Senate as to what sort of assurances that the government had sought from Sweden. Here he is.
We have no status in the UK court system, and we don't intervene in courts where Australian citizens outside the country are engaged in any case. But I can tell the Senator that we made representation as the government of Sweden, seeking assurances that were they to succeed in their extradition of Mr Assange, that he would be treated according to due process. He'd be treated, in other words, as any citizen of Sweden would be treated, and they gave us that assurance.
So is that fair enough? Is that all he can and should be doing?
No, I think because the issue here in the Assange case and in Ecuador's intervention is not about Sweden, it's about the United States. And every time, I haven't got the words quite right in my mind, but every time a minister is asked about, have you asked America whether they plan to intervene and extradite him, the answer is something like, we have no knowledge that the US is planning to do that, or we have no understanding that the US is, which is weasel words completely. The question is, have you spoken to the Secretary of State and have they said, no, we're not going to? We don't get that answer. So which suggests that the US either isn't telling them or they are telling them.
Plausible.
Which is, I think, most likely that the US isn't telling them or that Australia isn't asking the question.
But you're making assumptions, perhaps they're reasonable assumptions, that the Americans have got a very keen interest in this and they want to get their hands on him. But at this point, it's about whether Julian Assange should go to Sweden and answer questions related to allegations of sexual assault. Now, why shouldn't he do that?
Well, he certainly should answer questions. If he has a real fear that, if you accept he has a real fear that once in Sweden, then he's available to the US.
But why? What's the difference between Sweden and the UK?
In their point of view, to play devil's advocate, what's the difference of getting the Swedish authorities to the Ecuadorian embassy to ask questions or to Britain where he's been under house arrest for a year to ask questions? And they won't do that. So that's what makes them alarmed. Personally, I think he should go to Sweden and answer questions. But then, I'm not the one who might get nabbed and put into maximum security prison in America.
For the rest of your life.
And there are precedents, apparently, for Sweden going to other countries and interviewing people. So they're not asking them to do something they haven't done in the past. And I guess that's what raised the suspicion.
I've got to say, the whole thing seems to me like a bit of a put-up job. I think the allegations seem a bit tenuous in the first place. I think the legal process seems to be less rigorous than it might be to... and I think the intentions of the United States are, willfully made unclear. I think it's all... looks a bit like the whole thing's set up to get Assange at the end of the day.
All that needs to happen is the American President or Secretary of State or somebody at that level needs to say, we will not move to extradite Julian Assange from Sweden. That's all that needs to happen. And then Britain and Ecuador could work it out and he would be off to Sweden.
And in the meantime, Britain's gotten itself into a bit of a pickle with the whole notion that it would, the threat that it would conduct a police raid inside another country's diplomatic mission.
All because America
had to
won't
wind back pretty
clarify.
quickly once it really thought through the implications of doing that for diplomats everywhere.
Now,